This season required more strength than you expected. This season asked more of you than you planned to give. Not because you were careless, not because you overcommitted, but because life unfolded in ways that didn't wait for you to feel ready. Responsibilities accumulated quietly, expectations grew without warning, and before you realized it, you were carrying far more than you ever imagined you would. You didn't enter this season thinking it would require this much strength. You thought it would be manageable, demanding maybe, but still within reach. And yet, here you are, tired in ways you didn't know how to explain. Not exhausted from one event, but worn down from consistency, from showing up again and again and again. This season required more strength than you expected. Not dramatic strength, not visible heroics, but quiet strength. The kind that holds steady when emotions fluctuate, the kind that keeps functioning when rest feels overdue, the kind that makes responsible decisions even when motivation is low. You didn't suddenly become strong. You adapted. You learned how to keep moving without relying on adrenaline. You learned how to pace yourself instead of pushing until collapse. And that adaptation came at a cost. You felt it in your body, in your thoughts, in the way your patience became more selective. This wasn't weakness. It was reality. And Scripture speaks clearly to people living inside this kind of pressure. Psalms 73-26 says, "My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever." This psalm was written from internal conflict, not from comfort. The psalmist was still standing, still functioning, but internally depleted. When he says his flesh and heart may fail, he is acknowledging limits, not sin, not lack of faith. Limits, and the promise that follows does not shame those limits. It answers them. God becomes strength where your own strength ends. Not all at once, not dramatically, but consistently, enough to sustain you through another day. That demands your presence. That is how you survived this season, not because it became easy, but because you were sustained. This season didn't allow you to rely on enthusiasm. It required discipline. There were days when your emotions were behind, but your responsibilities were not. So you learned how to move forward without waiting to feel ready. You learned how to make decisions while still feeling uncertain. That takes strength. And not everyone understands that. From the outside, your life may look unchanged. You're still showing up, still meeting expectations, still functioning, but internally, you know how much this required? Psalm 55-22 speaks directly into that tension. Cast your burden on the Lord, and He will sustain you. David wrote this while under pressure. That did not pause. Leadership, conflict, betrayal, casting his burden did not mean stepping away from responsibility. It meant transferring the weight of outcome. The work remained, but the crushing pressure did not have to stay on his shoulders alone. That distinction is what kept you upright. You didn't stop carrying responsibility. Who stopped carrying it? As if everything depended on you alone. That shift protected your inner life. It kept fatigue from turning into resentment. This season required more strength because it demanded restraint. There were moments when you could have said more. Moments when expressing everything you felt would have been understandable, but you didn't. You chose restraint. You chose to preserve relationships, integrity, and long-term stability over short-term relief. That kind of strength doesn't feel powerful in the moment. It feels tiring, but it produces maturity. Psalm 121-3 says, He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. This verse does not promise a smooth road. It promises steadiness. The ground beneath you was uneven, the load heavier than you anticipated. But you didn't lose your footing. You adjusted your pace. You slowed down where speed would have caused damage. That wasn't weakness. That was wisdom. This season also required strength because it exposed limits he hadn't faced before. You learned that you cannot do everything. You learned that not every expectation deserves your energy. That realization didn't come from theory. It came from necessity. And it changed how you guard your inner life. Proverbs 4:23 says, Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. You began guarding your heart, not by isolating yourself, but by becoming discerning. You learned to say no internally, even when you said yes externally. You learned when to engage and when to conserve. That balance is not instinctive. It is developed in seasons that require more strength than expected. This season also revealed how alone strength can feel. There were moments when you wished someone else would notice how much you were carrying. One acknowledgement would have eased the weight. But recognition didn't come. So you learned to continue without it. Psalm 66:10 says, "For you, O God, have tested us. You have refined us like silver." Refining does not destroy. What matters? It removes what cannot last. Silver survives the heat. It becomes clearer. Because of it, you're clearer now. Clearer about your limits. Clearer about your priorities. Clearer about what you can carry and what you must release. That clarity came at a cost, but it was not wasted. Isaiah 40:31 says, "Those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength." Waiting here does not mean inactivity. It means restraint. It means continuing forward. Without immediate clarity, without guarantees, you did that. You waited while working. You waited while deciding. And strength was renewed. Not as excitement, but as steadiness. Enough to stay aligned. Enough to remain faithful. This season required more strength because it reshaped how you define progress. You no longer measure it by speed or applause. You measure it by sustainability, by whether you can remain consistent without burning out, by whether your values remain intact under pressure. That shift matters because future seasons will require people who can carry weight without losing themselves. Jesus spoke directly to people living inside this kind of pressure. In Matthew 11:28, he said, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Jesus does not call those who avoided responsibility. He calls those who labored. Rest here is not escape. It is restoration within responsibility. Jesus understands what this season cost you. He does not minimize it. This season required more strength than you expected. And God knows that. He saw the discipline. No one applauded. The restraint. No one acknowledged. The faithfulness. That held things together when it would have been easier to let them unravel. Nothing was overlooked. Nothing was wasted. You didn't imagine how hard this was. You weren't weak for feeling tired. You were faithful. And that matters. If this message spoke to you, like the video, share it with someone who is carrying more than they ever say out loud. Subscribe for more devotionals that speak to real life and real faith. And And if you feel led, leave a comment saying, God gave me strength. May His peace find you today.